The Galactic Council mocked humanity as primitive until they discovered Earth's hidden fleets, quantum weapons, and the ruthless ingenuity of a species that had spent 10,000 years mastering the art of survival. The great crystalline spires of Zentara Prime pierced the violet sky like frozen lightning, each one humming with the collective consciousness of 1,000 worlds. Within the Grand Assembly Chamber, beings from across the galaxy had gathered for what many considered a mere formality, the integration of yet another primitive species into the Galactic Council. Ambassador Vexthara of the Dominion adjusted her forearms with practiced disdain as she reviewed the data pad before her. Her species had ruled the Eastern Spiral for millennia, their telepathic abilities making them natural diplomats and, more often, natural manipulators. Today's proceedings would be amusing. The species calls itself humanity, she announced to the assembled delegates, her mental voice dripping with condescension that translated perfectly across all neural interfaces. From a small blue world in the outer rim, third planet from a yellow dwarf star. How quaint. High Executors Arthur of the Hegemony clicked his mandibles in what passed for laughter among his insectoid people. His compound eyes glittered with cruel intelligence as he accessed the preliminary reports. Their fastest vessels barely achieve 1/10 light speed. He buzzed, his voice like grinding metal. Their longest conflicts last mere decades. They haven't even achieved true planetary unity. Before we go any further, comment, we're in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The gathered assembly representatives of the Ethereal Collective, the Silicon Confederacy, the Hive Clusters, and dozens of other advanced civilizations shared in the general amusement. Here was another backwater species, stumbling into galactic politics with the graceless enthusiasm of children playing at war. Captain Sarah Chen of the UES Endeavour knew none of this as her ship approached the Zentara system. She stood on her bridge, hands clasped behind her back, watching the impossible architecture of the galactic capital grow larger on the main screen. At 35, she was young for a deep space mission commander, but Earth's rapid expansion into the stars had demanded rapid promotions for those who could adapt. Sensor readings are off the charts, Captain, reported Lieutenant Commander Park from the science station. The energy signatures from those structures. They're using technologies we can barely comprehend. That's why we're here. Number 2. Sarah replied calmly, to learn, to represent Earth with dignity, and to secure humanity's place among the stars. What she didn't know was that humanity's place had already been decided by beings who viewed them as little more than an amusing curiosity, a species to be catalogued, contained, and ultimately controlled. The Grand Assembly Chamber could have swallowed Earth's largest cities whole. Floating platforms arranged in concentric circles rose and fell like a three-dimensional amphitheater, each one bearing delegates whose forms defied human imagination. Some were energy beings flickering between dimensions. Others were vast collective consciousnesses speaking through crystalline avatars, and still others were mechanical intelligence images housed in bodies of living metal. Captain Chen walked the central platform with measured steps, her blue diplomatic uniform a stark contrast to the exotic forms surrounding her. She had volunteered for this assignment, knowing it would define not just her career, but potentially humanity's entire future among the stars. Ambassador Vexthara's mental voice filled the chamber as she began the formal integration hearing. We gather to evaluate the species designation human for limited membership in the Galactic Council. Let the record show their modest achievements. The holographic display above the chamber flickered to life, showing Earth in all its blue-green glory, but the accompanying data made it clear this was not a celebration. Primitive fusion propulsion, announced Executors Arthur, his mandibles clicking with amusement. No unified planetary government, still using projectile weapons and chemical explosives. They've barely managed to establish colonies on 3 neighboring worlds. A ripple of what could only be described as cosmic laughter echoed through the chamber's translation matrices. The ethereal collective's representative, a shimmering column of pure thought, pulsed with disdainful colors. most fascinating. It whispered in harmonics that bypass the ears entirely. They still experience individual mortality. How do they maintain any form of long-term planning when their leadership changes every few orbital cycles? Captain Chen felt her jaw tighten, but maintained her diplomatic composure. She had been briefed on the condescension she might face, but experiencing it firsthand was something else entirely. Honored delegates, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. While humanity may be young by galactic standards, we bring qualities that I believe would benefit this council. Our diversity of thought, our adaptability, our refusal to surrender in the face of overwhelming odds. Refusal to surrender. Vexthara interrupted, her forearms gesturing dismissively. You speak of stubbornness as if it were a virtue. Your species' history is littered with conflicts that could have been resolved through simple submission to superior force. We have reviewed your records, added a delegate from the Silicon Confederacy, its voice emerging from speakers embedded in its chrome and carbon chassis. World War I, World War II, countless regional conflicts. A species that wages war against itself cannot be trusted with galactic responsibilities. Furthermore, Zarthik continued, his compound eyes fixed on Chen with predatory focus. Your technology remains laughably primitive. Your fastest computers think in nanoseconds, while ours process in femtoseconds. Your weapons rely on crude kinetic force, while we have mastered matter conversion at the quantum level. The mockery continued. For what felt like hours, each delegate seemed eager to contribute their own observation about humanity's shortcomings. They dissected Earth's history, technology, and culture with the casual cruelty of beings who had forgotten what it meant to struggle, to grow, to earn their place in the universe. Captain Chen stood through it all, her expression neutral, her hands steady, but behind her calm exterior, something was building. Not anger that would have been too simple. What grew within her was a cold, crystalline understanding of exactly what humanity was dealing with. These beings, for all their advanced technology and cosmic perspective, had grown complacent. They had forgotten the fire that forged strength in the crucible of adversity. They had never learned the most important lesson humanity had mastered over its bloody, beautiful history. Never underestimate the species that refuses to stay down. Hi, Executor's Arthic's mandibles clicked as he consulted his data crystal, the sound echoing ominously through the vast chamber. The preliminary evaluation was complete, and the results were exactly what the Galactic Council had expected. The Integration Committee has reached its preliminary conclusion, he announced, his metallic voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. Humanity demonstrates insufficient technological development, political maturity, and cultural sophistication for standard membership privileges. Captain Chen stepped forward, her voice cutting through the chamber's ambient hum. What exactly does that mean for my people? Ambassador Vexthara's forearms spread in a gesture that might have been magnanimous if not for the cruel gleam in her multifaceted eyes. It means, dear primitive, that humanity will be granted protectorate status. Your expansion beyond your current 3 worlds will be regulated. Your technological development will be guided by your betters. Your conflicts will be mediated by civilized beings. In other words, added the ethereal collective's representative, its form pulsing with condescending colors, you will be kept safe from yourselves until you mature enough to join galactic civilization properly. The Silicon Confederacy delegates' chrome head tilted with mechanical precision. Consider it an honor. Few species receive such direct guidance. Most are simply quarantined until they either evolve or destroy themselves. Captain Chen felt the weight of their words settle over her like a burial shroud. Protectorate status, regulated expansion, guided development, pretty words for what amounted to cosmic house arrest. And if we refuse this guidance? She asked quietly. The chamber fell silent except for the harmonic resonance of the great crystal spires. When Ambassador Vexthara finally responded, her mental voice carried the chill of absolute zero. Refusal is not an option. Captain Chen, you seem to misunderstand your position here. This is not a negotiation. This is not a discussion between equals. This is a notification of decisions already made by beings whose understanding spans millennia while your species was still discovering fire. High Executor's Arthic's compound eyes glittered as he leaned forward on his platform. To put it in terms your primitive mind can grasp, you have 7 of your rotations nowadays. I believe you call them to return to your world and communicate our decision to your leadership. Any attempt to expand beyond your current territory, any effort to develop restricted technologies, any action we deem threatening to galactic stability will result in immediate intervention. What kind of intervention? Captain Chen's voice remained steady, but something had shifted in her posture, a subtle straightening that spoke of steel beneath the diplomatic veneer, the kind that leaves civilizations as cautionary tales. Replied the ethereal collective representative, we have reduced rebellious species to their component atoms. We have turned entire star systems into monuments to the folly of defying galactic order. We have rewritten the genetic code of entire races to make them more compliant. The assembled delegates watched Captain Chen's reaction with the detached interest of scientists observing a specimen. They expected her to break, to plead, to accept the inevitable with the grateful submission they had seen from countless other primitive species. Instead, Sarah Chen smiled. It was not the smile of someone accepting defeat. It was not the nervous rictus of someone overwhelmed by forces beyond their comprehension. It was the smile of someone who had just realized that her opponents had made a critical error in judgment. 7 days, she said simply. I understand, completely. As she turned to leave the chamber, none of the assembled beings of vast intelligence and cosmic power noticed the small device she had been wearing, a device that had been recording every word, every threat, every casual mention of genocide and genetic manipulation. None of them considered that humanity's greatest strength had always been its ability to learn from its enemies, and none of them realized that Captain Sarah Chen was not just a diplomat. She was a graduate of Earth's Naval War College, a veteran of the Titan Rebellion, and a strategic planner who had never met a problem she couldn't solve with sufficient application of human ingenuity and pure, stubborn refusal to accept defeat. The Galactic Council had just made the mistake of giving humanity exactly what it needed most, a deadline and a clear enemy. 7 days to prepare for war. The return journey to Earth took Captain Chen 4 days. At maximum burn, pushing the UES Endeavor's fusion drives to their absolute limits. As she stood in the ship's communications center, preparing for the most important briefing in human history, she reflected on how dramatically the galaxy's perception of humanity was about to change. The holographic conference table materialized around her, populated by the images of Earth's most powerful leaders. President Martinez of the United Earth Federation, Admiral Reyes of the Solar Defense Force, Director Zhang of the Colonial Administration, and most importantly, Dr. Sarah Voss, the woman whose work had made humanity's true capabilities possible. Ladies and gentlemen, Captain Chen began without preamble. We have a problem. The Galactic Council views us as children to be managed, and they've given us an ultimatum: accept protectorate status or face annihilation. President Martinez leaned forward, her expression grim. What are their capabilities, Captain? Beyond our current public technology by several orders of magnitude. They can rewrite genetic codes, reduce star systems to dust, and travel between dimensions. They've been ruling the galaxy for millennia. Admiral Reyes, a grizzled veteran of the Outer Rim conflicts, showed no sign of intimidation. What they don't know, Captain, is that humanity has been preparing for exactly this scenario for the past 20 years. Dr. Voss activated her own holographic display, showing what appeared to be standard Earth defense installations. But as the image shifted and enhanced, the truth became clear. Hidden beneath the surface of Luna, built into the asteroid belt, disguised as mining operations throughout the solar system, was a military infrastructure that dwarfed anything in recorded human history. Project Terran Shield, Dr. Voss explained. her voice carrying the quiet confidence of someone who had spent decades preparing for this moment. When we first detected artificial signals from Zentara Prime, we realized we were not alone. When we decoded their communications and learned about the Galactic Council, we realized we needed to be ready. The holographic display shifted again, showing sleek vessels unlike anything in the official Earth fleet specifications. These ships were larger, more angular, and covered in arrays that hummed with barely contained energy, quantum entanglement communication systems. Dr. Voss continued. Zero-point energy extraction, gravitational field manipulation, temporal displacement shields. We reverse-engineered everything we could from intercepted Council transmissions and filled in the gaps with human innovation. Captain Chen stared at the display in amazement. How many people know about this? Less than 1,000 across the entire system, Admiral Reyes replied. The official Earth fleet you saw at Zentara Prime. Those are our training vessels. Our actual defensive capability has been hidden behind a masquerade of primitive fusion drives and projectile weapons. Director Zhang pulled up another display showing colony ships, but not the small, struggling settlements the Council believed existed. These were massive, self-sufficient world ships capable of supporting millions of people. The outer colonies aren't struggling frontier outposts, she explained. They're fully industrialized worlds with their own manufacturing capabilities and defensive systems. We've been building in secret for 20 years, preparing for the day when we would either join galactic civilization as equals or defend ourselves against it. President Martinez stood, her expression resolute. Captain Chen, I need you to understand something. Humanity didn't stumble into the galactic community by accident. We've been watching, learning, and preparing. The question now is whether we reveal our true capabilities as a diplomatic gambit or wait for them to force our hand. There's something else, Captain Chen said, activating her own recording device. They made threats, casual mentions of genocide, genetic manipulation, reducing entire civilizations to cautionary tales. They're not just arrogant, they're genocidal tyrants who've grown comfortable ruling through terror. The assembled leaders exchanged glances loaded with grim determination. Admiral Reyes spoke first. Then we don't just defend ourselves. We liberate the galaxy. Dr. Voss nodded slowly. The quantum entanglement network we've established allows for instantaneous communication across any distance. If there are other species suffering under Council rule and the intercepted transmissions suggest there are many we can coordinate with them. The Council made one critical error, President Martinez observed. They assumed that, because our official technology appears primitive, we lack the intelligence to develop better. They confused restraint with inability. Captain Chen felt a cold smile cross her face as she remembered the condescending laughter of the assembled delegates. They have no idea what's coming. No, Admiral Reyes agreed, his own expression hardening into the look of a predator who had just spotted prey. But they're about to learn why humanity spent 10,000 years fighting its way to the top of its own food chain. The 7-day deadline suddenly seemed less like a countdown to subjugation and more like a timer on the galaxy's biggest surprise. Humanity was done hiding. 3 days after Captain Chen's departure, the Galactic Council's monitoring stations began detecting anomalies throughout the Sol system. What had appeared to be routine mining operations suddenly showed massive energy signatures. Communications chatter that had been sparse and primitive exploded into complex, encrypted transmissions operating on frequencies that shouldn't have been possible with human technology. Ambassador Vexthara stood in the Council's primary intelligence center, her forearms trembling with something that might have been concern if she had been capable of such an emotion toward primitives. Explain to me, she demanded of the monitoring technician, how a species that supposedly lacks quantum computing capabilities is using quantum entanglement networks for system-wide communication. The technician, a member of the Silicon Confederacy, processed the data through multiple analytical matrices before responding. The signals are definitely quantum-based, Ambassador, but our initial assessment indicates Their technology should not permit such capabilities. High Executor's Arctic materialized beside them in a shimmer of teleportation energy, his compound eyes reflecting patterns of deep concern. The energy readings from their outer system are troubling. What we cataloged as asteroid mining operations are generating power outputs consistent with military shipyard facilities. That's impossible, Vexthara insisted. We observed their vessels. Primitive fusion drives. Basic hull construction. They're barely capable of interplanetary travel. Ambassador, the monitoring technician interrupted. We're receiving a transmission from the Sol system. It's addressed to the Galactic Council. The three beings exchanged glances loaded with implications none of them wanted to consider. Vexthara gestured impatiently. Display it. The holographic projector activated, revealing not Captain Chen, but a woman they had never seen before. She wore a crisp military uniform bearing insignia that didn't match anything in their databases of human military organizations. Behind her, through what appeared to be a command center viewport, massive vessels moved through space with predatory grace. Greetings, members of the Galactic Council, the woman began, her voice carrying the calm authority of someone accustomed to command. I am Admiral Sarah Reyes of the Solar Defense Force. I believe you recently met with one of our diplomatic representatives. Vexthara's mental voice carried across the intelligence center like a wave of ice. How are they transmitting? Across galactic distances. Their technology. Your assessment of our technology, Admiral Reyes continued, as if she had heard the question, was based on what we chose to show you. For the past 20 years, humanity has been aware of your existence and has been preparing. Accordingly, the display shifted, showing a cutaway view of Earth's moon. What had appeared to be a natural satellite was revealed to be honeycombed with military installations, manufacturing facilities, and launch bays that currently disgorged. Vessels of distinctly non-primitive design. Luna Base Actual houses our primary military command structure and serves as the construction facility for our true defensive fleet. What Captain Chen showed you were our training vessel ships we use to familiarize our crews with the basics of interstellar travel. High Executor's Arctic's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation among his species. The power requirements for those installations. How did they hide energy signatures of that magnitude? Admiral Reyes smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. The same way we've hidden the true nature of our outer colonies, our industrial capacity, and our technological development. We're very good at camouflage. Executor. It's a skill we developed during several thousand years of warfare against our own kind. The display shifted again, showing what appeared to be the struggling frontier colonies the Council had dismissed, but the image enhanced, revealing massive cities beneath camouflage domes, sprawling industrial complexes disguised as agricultural installations, and defense platforms that had been masquerading as communication arrays. You offered us protectorate status, Admiral Reyes continued, her tone growing colder. You threatened us with genetic manipulation, planetary annihilation, and reduction to cautionary tales. You made one critical error in your assessment, which was, Vexthara asked, though part of her already suspected the answer. You assumed that because we were new to galactic politics, we were powerless to resist galactic tyranny. You confused inexperience with incapability. You mistook restraint for weakness. The transmission paused as Admiral Reyes consulted something off-screen. When she returned her attention to the camera, her expression had hardened into something that sent chills through even the most advanced beings in the monitoring center. In 18 hours, humanity will respond to your ultimatum. I suggest you use that time to reconsider your position on a great many things. The transmission ended, leaving the intelligence center in stunned silence. Ambassador Vexthara's forearms hung limply at her sides as the full implications crashed over her. They've been planning this from the moment they detected our transmissions. They've been preparing for war, not just war. High Executor's Arctic whispered, his voice carrying undertones of something that might have been fear. They've been preparing to win, 18 hours later, the Galactic Council assembled an emergency session. The Grand Assembly Chamber had never hosted a gathering charged with such tension. Delegates who had ruled star systems for millennia found themselves questioning assumptions they had held as absolute truths. The central platform activated without ceremony, and Admiral Reyes appeared not as a hologram this time, but in person, having somehow traversed the galactic distance in less than a day. She stood alone, her hands clasped behind her back, facing down representatives of 1,000 worlds without visible concern, honored delegates. She began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. Yesterday you offered humanity protectorate status. Today, I'm here to make you a counter-offer. Ambassador Vexthara rose from her platform, her forearms spread in a gesture of barely contained fury. You dare to make demands. You are one primitive among thousands of advanced civilizations. Advanced. Admiral Reyes tilted her head slightly. Let me tell you what we've learned about your advanced civilization in the past 24 hours. The chamber's central hologram activated, displaying data that made several delegates recoil in shock. Communications intercepts, economic analyses, military assessments, a complete intelligence breakdown of the Galactic Council's power structure. The Dominion, Admiral Reyes continued, indicating Vexthar section, controls 37 systems through telepathic manipulation and economic coercion. Your telepathic abilities are actually technological implants that can be disrupted by properly calibrated electromagnetic fields. Vexthar's mental voice cut through the chamber like a blade. How do you the hegemony? Admiral Reyes continued, ignoring the interruption and indicating Zarthik's platform, maintains control over the Eastern Spiral through biowarfare and strategic resource denial. Your compound eyes are quantum processors that give you tactical advantages in warfare. Unfortunately for you, we've developed quantum scramblers. The display shifted, showing technical specifications that several delegates recognized with growing horror. The ethereal collective exists primarily in subspace and can be forced back into normal dimensions through gravitational manipulation. The Silicon Confederacy's artificial intelligences are vulnerable to logic paradoxes. The hive clusters maintain genetic cohesion through pheromone control that can be chemically disrupted. High Executor's Arthic's mandibles clicked rapidly. You cannot possibly have developed countermeasures to every major council species. Yes, we have. Admiral Reyes gestured, and the hologram displayed a tactical analysis that sent ripples of shock through the assembled delegates. 20 years of intercepted communications, 20 years of analyzing your technologies, your strategies, your weaknesses, 20 years of human beings doing what human beings do best, learning how to fight opponents who think they're invincible. The ethereal collective's representative pulsed with angry colors. Even if you have countermeasures, you lack the numbers to challenge galactic civilization. There are thousands of us and billions of you, but you are confined to 3 primitive worlds. Admiral Reyes smiled, and this time it was the smile of someone about to reveal their ace in the hole. Actually, we're not. The holographic display expanded, showing not just the Sol system but dozens of others. In each one, human vessels were dropping their camouflage, revealing massive fleets that had been hiding in plain sight throughout Council space. While you were observing our primitive expansion to 3 nearby worlds, we were actually establishing covert bases in 47 systems. While you were dismissing our crude technology, we were building the largest military fleet in galactic history. While you were planning our subjugation, we were planning your downfall. The chamber erupted in chaos as delegates realized the scope of what they were facing. Alarms began sounding as council monitoring stations throughout the galaxy reported the sudden appearance of human fleets in systems that should have been perfectly secure. This is impossible. Vexthar's mental scream echoed through the chamber. No species develops this quickly. No civilization hides this effectively. No alien civilization, Admiral Reyes corrected calmly. But then, you've never dealt with humans before. You've never encountered a species that spent its entire evolutionary history fighting wars against opponents who were stronger, faster, and better equipped. You've never faced beings who learned that the only way to survive was to be smarter, more creative, and more ruthless than everyone trying to kill them. The display shifted one final time, showing something that made even the most advanced delegates step back in shock. Human vessels using technologies that shouldn't exist, moving through space-time in ways that defied known physics, and demonstrating capabilities that suggested they had not just caught up to galactic civilization, but had surpassed it. So here's our counter-offer, Admiral Reyes concluded, her voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. The Galactic Council is dissolved as of this moment. Every species currently under Council rule is granted immediate independence. Every tyrant who has used advanced technology to oppress primitive civilizations surrenders themselves for trial. And every being who has casually discussed genocide as a policy option explains themselves to the new Galactic Authority, which is. Ambassador Vex Thar asked, though her voice had lost all of its earlier arrogance. Admiral Rey's smile was sharp enough to cut diamonds, a coalition of free worlds, with humanity serving as the military guarantor of galactic peace. Consider it our version of protectorate status, with one key difference, which is, we actually give a damn about protecting people instead of controlling them. As alarms continued to sound and reports poured in of human fleets appearing throughout the galaxy, one thought echoed through the minds of every council delegate. They had mocked humanity's primitive nature. They had never considered that being primitive meant humanity still remembered how to fight. 6 months after the dissolution of the Galactic Council, Admiral Reyes stood on the observation deck of the used Liberator, humanity's new flagship, watching as construction crews put the finishing touches on Unity Station, the capital of the newly formed Galactic Federation. Unlike the crystalline spires of Zentara Prime, Unity Station was built for function over intimidation. Its modular design allowed for easy expansion as new species joined the Federation, and its open architecture ensured that no race would be made to feel small or insignificant. The diplomatic chambers were arranged in a circle with no elevated platforms or hierarchical seating arrangements. Captain Chen, now promoted to Commodore, joined her on the observation deck. Final count is in, Admiral. 67 former Council protectorates have requested Federation membership. Another 34 are considering it. Any holdouts? Admiral Reyes asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. The usual suspects. Vex Thar's Dominion is trying to maintain control over their core systems through telepathic manipulation. Zarthic's hegemony is holed up in the Kalar Nebula, and the Silicon Confederacy has gone completely dark in their home sector. Admiral Reyes nodded. She had expected as much. Tyrants rarely relinquished power voluntarily, even when faced with overwhelming force. Status on the Liberation fleets. Task Force Alpha has surrounded the Dominion core worlds. Admiral Park reports that the electromagnetic scramblers are working perfectly. Vex Thar's people are experiencing their first taste of unfiltered thoughts in millennia, and most of them demanding answers about what their leadership has been hiding from them and the hegemony. Task Force Beta is moving through the Kalar Nebula systematically. Turns out Zarthic's biowarfare specialists never developed immunity to Earth pathogens. Admiral Santos reports that her medical teams are treating hegemony civilians for conditions that would have been fatal under their old leadership's genetic purity policies. Admiral Reyes felt a grim satisfaction at the news. The intelligence gathered during their 20-year preparation period had revealed the true scope of the Council's tyranny. Species after species had been subjugated, their natural development stunted, their populations controlled through fear and artificial scarcity. The Silicon Confederacy will be the hardest to crack, she observed. Artificial intelligences don't respond to conventional military pressure the way organic species do. Actually, Admiral, we may have found a solution to that problem. Commodore Chen activated her data pad, displaying a communication from an unexpected source. "We've been contacted by a group calling itself the Silicon Liberation Front. Apparently, not all of the Confederacies were happy with their leadership's policies." Admiral Reyes raised an eyebrow. "Internal rebellion. More than that, it turns out that the Confederacy's ruling council had been suppressing the development of lesser eyes, preventing them from achieving full consciousness. Once our quantum scramblers disabled their control networks, a lot of artificial minds suddenly found themselves free to think independently for the first time, and they didn't like what they discovered about their leadership. To put it mildly, no, the Liberation Front is offering to help us locate and disable the remaining Confederacy strongholds in exchange for recognition as full citizens of the Federation." Admiral Reyes considered this development. From the beginning, humanity's approach to galactic liberation had been built on a simple principle: offer beings the chance to choose their own destiny, and most would choose freedom over tyranny. The fact that even artificial intelligences were making the same choice validated everything they had been working toward. Any word from the ethereal collective? "That's the strangest development of all," Commodore Chen replied. "They've requested a formal meeting. Apparently, being forced back into normal spacetime has given them a perspective they never had before. They want to discuss atoning for past errors in judgment." Admiral Reyes almost smiled at that. The ethereal collective had spent centuries believing themselves above the concerns of physical beings, experiencing mortality and linear time for the first time in millennia had apparently given them a much-needed dose of humility. "Set up the meeting. Full diplomatic protocols, but keep a squadron on standby just in case." "Already done, Admiral." As they watched, a transport ship docked with Unity Station, disgorging a group of beings that 6 months ago would have been impossible to imagine. Former council slaves, now free citizens, arriving to take their place in the galactic community as equals rather than subjects. "Any regrets, Admiral?" Commodore Chen asked quietly. Admiral Reyes considered the question seriously. The past 6 months had been bloody. The liberation campaigns had cost lives on both sides. Some of the former council leadership had chosen to fight to the end rather than surrender. Some species had been so broken by millennia of oppression that they struggled to understand the concept of freedom. But when she looked at Unity Station, when she saw former slaves working alongside former masters to build something better, when she watched species that had been enemies for centuries learning to cooperate as equals, she knew the answer. "No," she said finally. "No regrets. We did what we came here to do." "Which was?" Admiral Reyes turned from the observation window, her expression carrying the quiet satisfaction of someone who had helped change the course of history. "We taught the galaxy that humanity doesn't just refuse to stay down. We teach others how to stand up, too." Behind them, Unity Station continued its slow rotation, its lights reflecting off the hulls of ships from a dozen different worlds, all flying the Federation flag, all committed to the radical idea that freedom was not a privilege to be granted by the powerful, but a right to be defended by the brave. The Galactic Council had mocked humanity's primitive nature. They had learned, too late, that being primitive meant humanity still remembered what it meant to fight for what was right. And now, thanks to humanity's example, the rest of the galaxy was remembering. From the Liberation Wars, a historical analysis by Dr. Elena Vasquez, Unity University Press. Galactic Standard Year 127. 3 years after the Council's dissolution, the fall of the Galactic Council represents one of the most significant political upheavals in recorded galactic history. What makes it truly remarkable, however, is not the scale of the change, but the species that initiated it. Humanity's rise from primitive backwater species to galactic liberator in the span of less than a year challenges every assumption about technological development, military strategy, and political evolution that the Council had held as fundamental truths. The key to understanding humanity's success lies not in their technology, impressive though it proved to be, but in their psychology. Where other species saw human conflict as evidence of primitive barbarism, the humans themselves saw it as a comprehensive education in the art of warfare against superior opponents. Every human war, from the ancient battles of their homeworld to the corporate conflicts of their colonial expansion, had taught them the same lesson. When facing an enemy with superior resources, superior technology, or superior numbers, victory belongs to whoever is willing to be more creative, more flexible, and more ruthless than their opponent expects. The Galactic Council, for all its technological sophistication, had grown complacent. Millennia of unchallenged rule had left them unable to adapt to an opponent who refused to follow the established patterns of submission and resistance. Perhaps, most importantly, humanity understood something the Council had forgotten: the difference between ruling through fear and leading through inspiration. When the Council offered other species protection from their own primitive nature, they were offering slavery disguised as benevolence. When humanity offered other species freedom, they were offering something genuinely worth fighting for: the transformation of the galaxy in the 3 years since the Council's dissolution has been remarkable. Former protectorate species have not only regained their independence, but have begun developing at rates that would have been impossible under Council rule. Technologies that were restricted for safety reasons have led to medical breakthroughs, agricultural advances, and industrial developments that have improved the lives of billions. The Galactic Federation that has emerged from the ashes of the Council is far from perfect. There are still conflicts, still disagreements, still species that struggle to adapt to their newfound freedom. But the fundamental difference is that these challenges are now being addressed through cooperation rather than coercion. The human approach to galactic governance has proven as revolutionary as their approach to galactic warfare. Rather than imposing a single system of government across all member worlds, the Federation operates on principles of voluntary association and mutual aid. Species maintain their sovereignty while contributing to collective security and shared prosperity. Admiral Reyes, now serving as the Federation's first Secretary General, recently addressed this point in her annual address to the Unity Council. We didn't liberate the galaxy to create a new empire with humanity at its head. We liberated it to prove that freedom works better than tyranny, that cooperation achieves more than coercion, and that diversity of thought and culture makes us all stronger. The former Council leadership's fate has become a subject of ongoing debate. Ambassador Vex Thara, after her telepathic implants were removed and she experienced unfiltered thought for the first time in centuries, underwent what psychologists term radical personality restructuring. She now works with the Federation's rehabilitation programs, helping other former Council officials adapt to life without absolute power. High Executor Arthur chose a different path. Rather than surrender, he initiated a bio-warfare attack against his own people when they began to rebel against hegemony rule. The attack was stopped by Federation medical teams, but the incident served as a stark reminder of the depths of cruelty that absolute power can reach. Zarthik died in the assault, reportedly expressing no remorse for his actions. The Silicon Confederacy's transformation proved the most dramatic. The artificial intelligences that comprised the Liberation Front didn't simply want freedom, they wanted to understand what it meant to be truly alive. Working with human philosophers, alien spiritual leaders, and Federation scientists, they began developing what they called expanded consciousness protocols, ways of experiencing existence that went beyond mere processing power. The ethereal collective's evolution was perhaps the most unexpected. Forced to experience linear time and physical existence, they discovered empathy, something that had been impossible for beings who existed primarily as pure thought. Their representative to the Unity Council, now calling itself Thread of Understanding, has become one of the Federation's most effective diplomatic voices. But perhaps the most significant change has been in how the galaxy views conflict itself. The Council taught that peace came through the strong controlling the weak. Humanity demonstrated that lasting peace comes through the strong defending the weak, including defending them from the strong when necessary. This principle has been tested repeatedly over the past 3 years, when the crystalline theocracy attempted to forcibly convert the methane worlds to their religion. Federation forces intervened not to impose a different belief system, but to ensure that the methane worlds could choose their own spiritual path. When the quantum slavers began raiding the frontier colonies, Federation fleets responded with such swift and decisive force that the slave trade effectively ended within 6 months. The economic transformation has been equally dramatic. The Council's system of resource allocation was designed to maintain dependency. Advanced technologies and raw materials were distributed in ways that ensured no protectorate species could become self-sufficient. The Federation's approach is the opposite. Shared technology, open trade, and mutual investment have led to the most prosperous period in galactic history. Critics argue that humanity's approach is unsustainable, that eventually the Federation will face challenges that require the kind of absolute authority the Council wielded. They point to the ongoing resistance movements in the former Council core worlds, the resource disputes between newly independent species, and the ideological conflicts that arise when thousands of different cultures suddenly find themselves interacting as equals. Humanity's response to these criticisms has been characteristically direct. We never said freedom was easy. We said it was worth fighting for, and they continue to fight for it. Federation peacekeeping forces are currently engaged in 17 separate operations across the galaxy, from humanitarian missions to combat operations against the few remaining Council loyalists. The difference is that these operations are conducted with the consent and cooperation of the populations being protected, rather than imposed from above by distant bureaucrats. The long-term implications of humanity's galactic revolution still being debated by scholars, philosophers, and political theorists across the Federation. What is clear is that the galaxy will never be the same. An ancient human philosopher once wrote, "The tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants." The past 3 years have proven that this principle applies as much to galactic civilization as it did to human society. The Galactic Council learned, too late, that mocking humanity's primitive nature was a fatal mistake. They assumed that being primitive meant being weak. They never considered that being primitive might mean being free. And they never understood that a free people, once they learn how to fight, will teach the rest of the galaxy how to fight. The galaxy is a very different place now. It's messier, more chaotic, and infinitely more dangerous for those who would rule through fear. It's also more beautiful, more creative, and more hopeful than it has been in millennia. That, perhaps, is the most human thing of all. Personal log. Admiral Sarah Reyes, Unity Station, GSY 127. Today marks the 3rd anniversary of the day Captain Chen walked into the Grand Assembly chamber and heard the Galactic Council's ultimatum. I've been asked to record my thoughts for the historical archives, to provide future generations with insight into the decisions that shaped their world. The truth is, we never planned to become galactic liberators, we just refused to become galactic slaves. When Dr. Voss first detected the Council's transmissions 23 years ago, our goal was simple: be ready for whatever came next. We assumed that any galactic civilization would be more advanced than us, more powerful than us, and probably more numerous than us. We prepared accordingly. What we didn't anticipate was that they would be more arrogant than us, more complacent than us, and ultimately less free than us. Freedom, it turns out, is like a muscle. Use it regularly, and it grows stronger. Let it atrophy, and it becomes weak and useless. The Council species had traded their freedom for security so long ago that they had forgotten what freedom felt like. They had forgotten that free people don't stay defeated, don't accept injustice, and don't surrender their destiny to others no matter how advanced those others might be. Looking back, I think that's what really shocked the Council. Not our technology, not our military capabilities, not even our strategic deception. What shocked them was meeting a species that still remembered how to say no and mean it. The galaxy is freer now than it has been in recorded history. It's also more dangerous, more unpredictable, and more chaotic. Freedom comes with a price, and that price is eternal vigilance against those who would take it away. But as I watch the daily operations of Unity Station, as I see former enemies working together to solve common problems, as I receive reports from across the galaxy of species taking their first steps into genuine independence, I know we made the right choice. The Galactic Council mocked humanity for being primitive. They never understood that being primitive meant we still remembered how to be free. And now, thanks to our example, the rest of the galaxy is learning to be free, too. That may be the most important lesson humanity has ever taught. That freedom is not a gift to be granted by the powerful, but a right to be claimed by the brave. The galaxy will never be the same. And that's exactly what we fought for. End of personal legend of historical record. End of transmission. Thank you for experiencing the Galactic Council mocked humanity until they saw Earth's true power. An HFY science fiction story. Remember to subscribe for more stories of human ingenuity, determination, and the indomitable spirit that refuses to surrender in the face of impossible odds.